Um, Esther is a woman in the Bible where she was known definitely for her fierce faith. And so, what does it mean to be fierce? To be fierce means to be strong, to be proud, or to have a violent nature. For an example, that could be someone's work ethic or pride. It also could be known as violently hostile or aggressive in temperament, giving to fighting or killing. Now, when we hear that, we don't really want those words associated with us as Christians, do we? Now think about it. How many of you back in the day were fighters? You can raise your hand if you feel comfortable. You know, the camera's not going to pan you guys. You know, if you were fighting, if you were arguing, I know I was definitely an argumentative person. You know, the Lord's still working on me to praise God. But you know, to be fierce, it doesn't have to have a negative connotation to it. It can talk about positive ways, which is being bold, to be unapologetic in how you express yourself, to be passionate, to follow your passion, and to not let others tell you how to conform, to be determined, to be furiously active, or again, determined, and to be strong, which is again being strong, proud, or dangerous, or to be intense, which is to be expressed with extreme force or anger. Negative ways that we see this word is violent, to be violently unfriendly or aggressive in disposition, to be a savage. I remember some years ago there was a song that was going around, everyone was singing it. I was like, guys, we should not be singing that. But it means to have a violent or unrestrained nature, and to be wild. And that is showing a turbulent force in nature, action, or intensity. And so we as the church, we are called the bride. And so earlier in this month, I did a podcast called Fierce Femininity, and it's kind of like, how do you have fierce and feminine when feminine can be known as nurturing, sweet, warm, sometimes passive, cooperative, or like a pushover, expressive, meaning sometimes they say, women talk a lot, all bark, no bite, action, no action. To be modest or humble and empathetic, putting others above yourself. And so these are things, again, that can be defined as the church, as the feminine sense of the church. But like I said, today we're going to be talking from the book of Esther. And there was this woman named Queen Vashti. And Vashti was the first wife of King Ahasuerus, and she refused and was firm in her stance to not go before the king and his men to pretty much show herself and show her body. And at this time, it was very disrespectful, very disrespectful to the point of where she could have died and been killed because she said no to the king. And so because of this, it lost her the kingdom and all the other women their opportunity to be fierce as well. So Esther chapter 1, verses 15 through 19 reads, "He said, according to the law, what is to be done with Queen Vashti, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus, which was conveyed by the eunuchs. And Memucan answered in the presence of the king, the officials, Vashti the queen has not only wronged the king, but also all the officials, royal representatives, and all the peoples who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's conduct will become known to all women, causing them to look on their husbands with contempt, disrespect, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she did not come. This very day, the ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's refusal, will speak in the same way to all the king's officials, and there will be plenty of contempt and anger. If it pleases the king, Let a loyal command be issued by him, and let it be written in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, so that it cannot be repealed or modified, that Vashti is no longer to come before King Ahasuerus. And let the king give her a royal position. Let the king give her royal position to another who is better and more worthy than she. So when we look at this, it's like sad because Vashti just wanted to stand up for herself. You know, she wanted to have dignity, all these things, and it hurt her and other women eventually in the kingdom. But isn't it amazing that God puts us in places that we would never even know, and it creates redemption? Amen. So we're not going to read the full part of it, but we learn again about the woman named Esther. And Esther's name originally was Hadassah. And Hadassah means myrtle, and it could be known in a flower form or in a tree form. And these flowers are known for their fragrance, and they've been associated with love, beauty, purity, and rebirth. Even though this horrible thing happened to Vashti, this opened the opportunity for Esther to become queen. This was bigger than her. It was for her people. Esther 2:21 through 23, it reads, In those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gates, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on gallows. And it was written in the book of Chronicles in the presence of the king. So Mordecai was a cousin. For those that don't know the background of the story, Mordecai was a cousin of Queen Esther. So we see in these passages that they had a really close relationship where pretty much Mordecai was one of the people at the king's gates. And so anytime there was something that was going on, he would give pretty much like secret messages to the people in the kingdom so that Esther was made aware known. And so we're going to read starting at chapter 3 in the book of Esther. And I'm going to be reading from the New King James Version. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gates bowed and paid homage to Haman. For so the king had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were within the king's gate said to Mordecai, Why do you transgress the king's command? Now it happened, when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. And so the reason of this was there was a rival between the Jews and the Agagites. Not necessarily a rival, but their people hated each other. And so for Haman to bow down to Haman, it would be really bad, for Mordecai. So when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage, Haman was filled with wrath. So he continued to get very angry and continued to feel disrespected. And so it says in verse 6, But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. So Haman had got so upset in this point and felt so disrespected. Instead of just going after one man, he went after the whole nation. How much do you have to hate someone to go after the whole nation just because they disrespected you? And so, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast lots before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is in the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all the other people's laws, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work to bring it into the king's treasuries." So the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you. Do with this what seems good to you." And so all of these letters went out to all of the king's provinces, and the letters said to kill, destroy, and to annihilate all the Jews, both young and old, little children and women. And in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, they are going to take their possessions. And again, a copy of this went out to everyone in the land. So the king said this to Haman, and they sat down and they drank. But the whole city of Shushan was perplexed. They were confused because one day they were fine, and the next day it's saying you got about a month and a week to live, because pretty much it was a death sentence put on all of them. Not only a death sentence, but pretty much you were being paid to kill them. It was a hitman, situation for everybody. And so, chapter 4, when Mordecai learned that all had happened, he tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went into the midst of the city. He cried out with a loud and bitter cry, and he went as far as the front of the king's gate, for no one might enter the king's gate. And so pretty much Mordecai is walking around in mourning because his people are about to die. I mean, all he knows is that his people are about to die. He doesn't know what is going to happen. And so Esther, again, they come and tell Esther, and Esther is like, "Please, put some clothes on, stop doing this, you're kind of making a mockery of yourself." And he said to her, "Listen," I'm paraphrasing, "listen, you're a part of these people too. If we die, you die too." And so pretty much he was saying to her, "Yeah, you're in the palace, but it's going to come to you." And so pretty much he was telling her that this was her moment. This is your moment to stand up and to fight for your people, to stand up and to fight for what you believe in. Stand up and fight, or sit down and be killed. And so this is why I'm bringing this here. We are people who are fighters, not in the natural, but in the spiritual. And we can't continue to sit and watch what is going on in the land and not stand up and rise up and do something about it. And so in chapter 4, verse 13, as I just said, and Mordecai told them to tell Esther, "Don't think in your heart that you will not escape the king's palace any more than all the Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" And so this is what this is. We are in a moment where God has put us in places and positions for such a time as this. God hasn't put us to be seen, like on social media and work and school, wherever we're going, just to be silent. There are issues that are going on where we sometimes feel like we're too afraid to speak on it because we don't want to die. We don't want our reputation to die. We don't want to feel like we're the weird ones out or whatever. And why I asked the question in the beginning, if you fought when you were in the world, why aren't you fighting now in the spirit? Why aren't you fighting now? Not fighting in the church, but fighting in your stance and being fierce. Why is it that now that we've become Christians, we feel that we have to be silent? We feel that we have to shut up. We feel like we have to be submissive, and in the sense of being pushed over and walked on and all these things. We have the ability to stand up and rise up. And we're actually called to stand up and rise up. So what is stopping us from doing that? And so, again, paraphrasing, because the Lord gave me so many scriptures, but just know all of Esther 3, all of Esther 4, all of Esther, the whole book of Esther. Just read the whole thing. It's amazing. But pretty much in Esther 4, verse 15, Esther said this to Mordecai: "Go and gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan, and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king," which is against the law, because she could have died. She could have died going against the king, as we saw with Queen Vashti. She lost her position. But she was saying, if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. If I get fired, I get fired. If I get blackmailed, I get blackmailed. But I got to do what I got to do because God is calling me for such a time as this. And so, in chapter 5, we're talking about how Esther puts on this banquet. And this is so funny. Esther puts on this banquet, and she invites Haman, who is the enemy of the Jews, and the king is also there. And in verse 3, the king says to her, "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half the kingdom." And so she says, "If it pleases the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared." Then the king said, "Bring Haman quickly, that he may do as Esther has said." So the king and Haman went to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And so, again, he says, "What is your petition? It shall be granted." And Esther says, "My petition and request is that if I have found favor in your sight, and if it pleases you to grant my petition and fulfill my request, then let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I will prepare for them tomorrow, and I will do as the king has said." So, in this, it was so funny because Haman was so excited that Esther had invited him to this banquet. And the thing is, no one knew that Esther was a Jew. Because if they did, then she would have been gone a long time ago. She wouldn't have even been qualified to be a queen. So Mordecai told her, "Don't say anything about where you're from." So Haman was just excited. He was happy to be in the room. He was telling his family everything. But he was still so upset because Mordecai would not bow down to him. And so he was upset to the point that he had ordered for gallows to come so that Mordecai could be hanged. And so, verse 1 in chapter 6, it says this: "That night the king could not sleep, so someone was commanded to bring the book of the records of Chronicles. And they read before the king, and it was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, the two king's eunuchs, the doorkeepers who had sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Then the king said, "What honor or dignity has been bestowed on Mordecai for this?" And the king's servant said, "Nothing has been done for them." Well, isn't it amazing that there is probably a king somewhere that's losing sleep over you? And I saw that and I was like, wow, like he was tossing and turning because the Lord had placed him on his heart. The Lord didn't allow him to sleep because he knew that evil was being done somewhere. And so, again, I'm saying this, what I want us all to think about is ourselves in this moment. What is going on where we're trying to build something? We're trying to be a representative. We're trying to stand bold and stand firm, but there is something that is blocking